Hello, and welcome to Life After the Family Home. Smart conversations about downsizing and planning the next chapter. Today's conversation is about a question that stops a lot of homeowners before they ever really begin. How do you start downsizing without feeling overwhelmed? Because for many people, downsizing sounds reasonable in theory, practical, smart, maybe even necessary, but then reality shows up. A house full of furniture, closets packed with years of life, drawers filled with things you forgot you even had, boxes in the garage, keepsakes in the spare room, paperwork stacked in cabinets. And suddenly, the idea of downsizing feels less like a plan and more like a mountain. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. This is something Skip Benton with Coldwell Banker Select. Real estate in northern Nevada has seen many times. For many homeowners, the hardest part is not the move itself. It is getting started. Because downsizing is rarely just about belongings. It is about memories, family history, life chapters, good intentions, and sometimes the very real fear that the process will be exhausting. That is exactly why so many people delay it. Not because they are avoiding reality, not because they are doing something wrong, but because the project feels too big to begin. So today, the goal is to make it simpler. If downsizing feels overwhelming, the answer is usually not to do more all at once. The answer is to make the process smaller. Smaller decisions, smaller sections, smaller goals. Because overwhelming usually comes from trying to solve the entire house in your head all at once. And that makes almost anyone want to shut down. So here's the first shift that helps. Do not start with the whole house. Start with one small, low emotion area. Not the garage, not the master closet, not the room full of family keepsakes, and probably not the place that has been avoided for the last 10 years. Start easy. A bathroom drawer, a linen closet, a kitchen cabinet, a single shelf, a nightstand. Why start there? Because in the beginning, the goal is not dramatic progress. The goal is momentum. You want one small win. You want to prove to yourself that decisions can be made without turning the entire day into an emotional event. Because once the first few decisions are made, the process starts to feel less intimidating. The second thing that helps is this. Do not ask, how do I get rid of everything? That question is too big. Instead, ask, what is the next small category I can make simpler? That is a much better question. Maybe today it is expired items in a bathroom cabinet. Maybe tomorrow it is extra coffee mugs. Maybe later this week it is old table linens or duplicate kitchen tools. That may not sound dramatic. Downsizing works best when it is not dramatic. Steady beats intense. A lot of homeowners think they need a whole weekend, a huge burst of energy, and some kind of perfect plan. Usually they need something much more realistic. A simple starting point, a short block of time, and permission to do this gradually. Another thing that helps is using very basic decision categories. You do not need a complicated system. You really only need a few clear buckets. Keep, donate, give to family or friends, discard. That is enough. The more categories you create, the slower the process becomes. And once it feels complicated, people get tired and stop. Simple systems are easier to use. That is what matters. It also helps to respect decision fatigue. Downsizing is tiring not only because of physical effort, but because of the number of choices. You are making hundreds of little decisions. Do I still use this? Do I still need this? Would I move this into my next home? Am I keeping it because it matters? Or because I do not want to decide? That is why shorter work sessions usually work better than long ones. You do not need to spend all day doing this. In fact, that often backfires. A focused 20-minute session can be more useful than an exhausting push that leaves you frustrated and done with the whole process. It is perfectly fine to stop while you still feel good. That is not quitting. That is pacing. And pacing matters because for most people, downsizing is not a one-day event. It is a process. Another helpful reminder is this. Not everything meaningful has to stay in the house to stay meaningful. That is important. A lot of the emotional weight in downsizing comes from the fear that letting go of an item means letting go of the memory. Usually it does not. The memory is still there. Sometimes a photo of the item is enough. Sometimes passing it to a family member is enough. Sometimes simply appreciating it one last time is enough. And sometimes the real reason something stays is not love. It is guilt. Guilt because someone gave it to you. Guilt because it cost money. Guilt because you think you were supposed to keep it. That kind of guilt quietly takes up a lot of space. So here's a useful question. Would this item still deserve a place in the next chapter of life? Not, did it matter once? Not, was it expensive? Not, would someone else expect it to stay? Just this. Does it still belong in the life ahead? That question creates clarity. Another thing to remember is that downsizing does not require having the entire future figured out. You do not need to know exactly where you are going. You do not need a move date. You do not need every detail in place. You can still begin simplifying. And often, that is the best time to start. Because when the process begins before there is pressure, it feels calmer and more thoughtful. There's room to pause, room to think, room to make better decisions. That is much better than waiting until a move becomes urgent. This is one reason early preparation matters. Not because anyone needs to rush, but because waiting too long can turn a manageable project into a stressful one. A health change, a financial shift, a family situation, a deadline. When life speeds things up, even simple decisions feel heavier. That is why beginning early is really about giving yourself options. You may not be ready to move, but you can absolutely get ready for a future that feels simpler. And that leads to one more important idea. Downsizing is not only about removing things, it is about creating ease. Ease in daily living, ease in cleaning, ease in maintenance, ease in future decisions, ease in whatever the next chapter looks like. That is a much healthier way to think about it, because if downsizing feels only like loss, it will be easy to resist. But if it begins to feel like making life lighter, it becomes much easier to continue. So if the question is where to begin, here is a very simple answer. Pick one small area. Set a short time limit. Use 4 simple categories. Stop before you are exhausted. Then repeat. That's enough. You do not need to finish quickly. You just need to begin. Because most homeowners do not need a perfect downsizing plan. They need a manageable first step. And once that first step happens, the next one becomes easier, then the next, then the next. And over time, what once felt overwhelming starts to feel possible, then practical, then freeing. So if downsizing has been sitting in the back of your mind and the thought of starting has felt too big, take that as a sign to make it smaller. Not someday, not all at once. Just one drawer, one shelf, one cabinet, one decision at a time. That is how it begins. Thank you for joining this conversation on Life After the Family Home. Smart conversations about downsizing and planning the next chapter. For more guidance, reach out to Skip Benton with Coldwell Banker Select Real Estate in Northern Nevada.